Hey, grade fours. It's me and Robbie. Lloydie laughed. We're going to read chapter 4, They Know. The look on Frank's face when I emerged with the key was almost worth nearly being buried alive. It turns out that the shiny object I spotted lying in the debris had been the Admiral's missing key. The underground chamber Keith had been exploring was just a few yards from the sinkhole. He was seriously lucky the entire thing hadn't collapsed on top of him. The bottom of the sinkhole was crazy, like a bombed-out crater with a 20-foot bronze giant who was taking a nap. I quickly examined the Admiral's statue while the fire department hoisted Keith and me to the surface. Other than the lost key, the old guy looked none the worse for wear. Frank reached out to pull me back onto solid ground. My brother and I have this silent connection, sort of like twins, even though we're a year apart. And I could tell that he was as relieved to see me as I was to see him. My excitement faded when I remembered that Keith and I hadn't been the only explorers underground when the ground caved in. Chris and Scott are still down there, I told Deputy Hickson. We have to go back to find them right now. Chris just texted me, Keith said hastily, waving his phone at the deputy. They made it out through another entrance. The deputy let out a huge sign of relief. Then he took the heavy bronze key from me and examined it curiously. Lucky break, everyone made it out okay, he murmured. Just make sure to have the paramedics check you out before you leave. I'm fine, but I think Keith sprained his ankle pretty badly, I said. I looked around, but he was already limping away. He seemed pretty shaken up by the whole ordeal, and I couldn't possibly blame him for wanting to skedaddle as soon as possible. By the time the adrenaline rush from our close call had worn off, I was feeling a little shaky myself. Let's clear the square until we can ensure the tunnel hasn't weakened the ground anywhere else, Deputy said. Deputy, what makes you so sure the ground collapsed because of the tunnels? Charlene asked, taping the digital recorder she carried with her everywhere. They've been there for hundreds of years, and this is the first time anything like this has ever happened. Deputy Hickson looked skeptical at the recorder. What else could it be? This is the first time people have explored many of them, so it probably just stirred up some old foundation. Can I quote you on that? What? No, the deputy said with a frown. I don't know what things look like from up here, but underground it sounded like a series of explosions, I offered. It seemed that way from above ground, too, Frank agreed. That doesn't make a lick of sense, Deputy Hickson said. It's rare, but pockets of combustible gas can build up underground, although they usually need to be ignited in order to actually blow up, Frank said, going into side sky mode. Maybe the Admiral ate too many beans today, I suggested. The deputy laughed so hard he snorted. He quickly tried to cover it up, clearing his throat. It probably just some sort of natural geological thing, like Frank said. We won't know more until the experts take a look. Until then, I don't want anyone else down in those tunnels. The deputy shot Frank and me a hard stare. That made it clear that last part was meant for us. He'd been around the Bayport PD long enough to know that we weren't always the best at listening when Chief Olaf told us not to do something. Anyone who ignores me on that is going straight to jail, he added before turning to Charlene. That you could quote me on. Deputy Hickson handed the big bronze key to another officer. This broke off when the statue fell. Let's make sure it gets to whoever's going to put the big guy back together. You know what's weird, I said? It's almost looked like the ring that was holding the key had been cut off the Admiral's belt with a blowtorch. It was a clean cut. I took the key from the officer and pointed out the dark spot on the top of the skeleton key where it had been looped onto the ring. And this burnishing looks a lot like torch marks, I pointed out. The deputy waved his hand dismissively, probably just a weak point in the middle left over from the restoration a few years ago. Signs blared from across the square as emergency vehicles arrived. I've got to go. You kids stay away from that sinkhole, he reminded us sternly before marching off with other officers. They'd forgotten to take the key. I slipped it into my gear bag, hoping the deputy wouldn't mind if we borrowed it for a while. All right, Hardy, Charlene said to my brother. Show me what you got. Okay, Frank replied, not exactly confidently, turning around his camera and scrolling through the pictures he'd taken. Most of them were snapped before the press conference, with a few pictures of Deputy Hickson speaking. I could see that the look on Deputy's face changed as the ground started shaking. After that, there wasn't much. I wasn't able to get the pic he wanted of Delilah Hickson at the press conference because, well, the press conference didn't last very long, Frank said sheepishly. But what about the sinkhole, Charlene asked. That's what everyone's going to want to see now. Well, I guess I was more concerned that everyone was okay. I wasn't really thinking about pictures, Frank explained. You can't print excuses, Hardy, she said. There's some stuff here you can use in a pinch, but I want something that really grabs readers' eyeballs. He hit me up when you got that. In the meantime, I'm going to get some more quotes. Now, I've got 2 front-page stories to file, she rushed off, recorder in hand. Frank hadn't been joking when he told me Charlene took being a reporter seriously. Lewis Lane Jr. was super intense. I could tell Frank was pretty crushed by her reaction to his pictures. I knew how much he wanted to impress her, but something else was bugging me. Something I'd seen in one of the photos. Can you flip back through some of those last pics, I asked him. Why, they're obviously not very good, he complained. I'm not so sure about that, I said as he scrolled through the images. Stop there! It was a picture of Deputy Hickson conferring with the mayor before the press conference. It wasn't them. I was interested, though. It was the woman in the background, way off to the side. It's an okay picture, I guess, but there isn't much going on, Frank said. Can you zoom in on Layla's mom, I asked. Mrs. Hickson? She barely is even in the picture. Frank stopped short when he noticed the furious expression on her face. Even with the big sunglasses hiding her eyes, you can tell she was mad. It looks like she's arguing with someone out of frame. Do you have a wider shot so we can see who, I asked? Frank quickly scrolled through the images. Nope, that's it. I took 3 or 4 pictures of the deputy and the mayor from the same angle. She's yelling at someone in each one, but that person is cut off. It might not mean anything, but I'd sure like to know what made her flip out at a press conference about her daughter's kidnapping. Could be relevant to the investigation, I said. Don't give up so easily, Frank said, smiling as he zoomed. He scared me, Robbie. He just licked me. Even tighter on Mrs. Hickson's face. Digital imaging has opened up all kinds of new forensic detection techniques. The resolution on this camera is high enough that I can enlarge the image enough for us to see the color of a person's eyes if I wanted. Yeah, but Mrs. Hickson is wearing sunglasses, I said, wondering what had Frank so smiley. And then it hit me. We could probably see the person she was arguing with reflected in her sunglasses. When I gazed at the image, I couldn't believe my eyes. Hey, is that Frank? Began. Sal? I finished. There was no mistaking the raggedy homeless man's reflection. Isn't he mute? Yeah, but he communicates by writing things down. Look, Frank said, zooming in on the next picture. Sure enough, Sal was holding a piece of paper. Can you zoom in farther, I asked. That's the best I can do. The writing's too small and out of focus. But from the look on her face, whatever Sal wrote has her ready to flip her lid. Frank scrolled to the next picture and zoomed in. This time Sal was scribbling something else on another sheet of the paper. But all we could see was the black back. Frank flipped to the final image and zoomed in. I don't know what Charlene was talking about, bro, I said, because that sure grabs my eyeballs. Sal's face wore a terrified expression. The sheet of paper he held had just 2 words scrawled in large, shaking print. They know. Ooh, this is getting good. And that's the end of chapter 4. And Robbie, midway, scared me because he licked me. He's such a nice lizard. Anyways, we'll see you guys for chapter 5.